Good morning, everyone. We're having a bit of a slow start today. We were waiting for a couple more people to come in. The room is a little emptier than it's been this past couple of days. I just want to start the day with just, a few updates, and then talk a little bit about where we are now in terms of our flow. We are now at the reinvention stage, but just how it connects with our previous day's conversations. Then we will play the videos from Tuesday and Wednesday, the feedback from the various sessions, and then we'll have our first opening panel. That wasn't supposed to come. Okay, I wanted to say that I noticed that quite a number of people are wearing black today. We thank you. I know that the other foundation does it. I know Jin also does it. I believe IM also does it. Thursdays in Black. So Thursday in Black is a global movement that's been led by the World Council of Churches to symbolize strength and courage, and that we stand in solidarity with the victims and survivors of violence, targeted violence, in particular LGBTI people. We've lost so many people to violence, to extreme and egregious violence, and we wear Thursday in Black in remembrance of them, to say that they are not forgotten, to say that just because we are still alive now doesn't mean we don't recognize just how easily our lives can be extinguished and how vulnerable our bodies are because of who we are. So thank you to everyone, but also to everyone who didn't do it, don't feel any type of way. Those of us who are doing it for you also. So I need to make an announcement about observing COVID protocols. Let's please remember to sanitize, wear our masks, social distance where we're able to. I know that people are tired. I'm tired. It's been a long process, necessarily so. This Kopano is different in many, many ways, and one of the ways that it's different is that it's a long Kopano. The previous Kopanos were about 3 days or so, but we have a 5-day Kopano because it was necessary. We haven't had opportunities to regroup and reconnect because of COVID and the many other things that have happened in the past couple of years. So it was necessary to give as much amount of time as possible for us to do the work and not feel shortchanged or rushed through the process. We thank you for your resilience, for still being here, notwithstanding the fact that we know and appreciate that you're tired. Robben Island in particular was taxing on the body and on the spirit. So, we appreciate how gracefully you've shown up nonetheless, that you are still here and that we're still in this space holding together. I hope the political conversations we're going to have today will wake us up and charge us back up. Please remember our values of kindness, working together. We're going to have some tense, some charged conversations, but let's remember to be kind always. We are addressing the issues. We're trying to get to the core of the issues, not necessarily addressing each other. So let's not, personalize our engagements with each other. Let's focus on how we reinvent our movements. We have a lost and found at registration. So for those who've lost items, please check them. In particular, we're looking for a black leather bag and then a black scarf. And those items were lost at the Tuesday event at the Graduate School of Business when we were sitting outside in the Maquis. So if anybody, pardon? It was found? The black bag was found. Great. Okay, the black bag was found. We're missing the scarf. So it's a black scarf. So if you find a black scarf, please take it to the lost and found desk. For those of us who take fresh air, to borrow Sheikh's phrase, let's please be mindful that not everybody participates in the fresh air. So our friends who don't smoke feel like, we're not sharing space with them in the sense that we're smoking around them, and some people are getting affected. Some people are actually sick from, being exposed to cigarette smoke. So let's remember our smoking areas and be mindful of the people around us who don't partake. Reimbursement, for those who haven't spoken to Bokang, please find Bokang today. Today we're doing COVID tests for people who need them going back to their countries. In particular, I believe it's Angola, Malawi, Mauritius, Seychelles, but if there's any other country, please, if you haven't done it, please speak to Bokang so arrangements can be made for how you can get the COVID test done. We know that, at this point in the proceedings, we're going to get some things right, and then we're going to get a whole lot of other things wrong. We've been listening to the feedback and the reflections that you've been giving us. We're doing our very, very best to take care of some of those, especially around the logistical arrangements. So please bear with us. We are together in the space. So let's try and solve problems together. It would be extremely helpful if we tried and, what's the past tense of troubleshoot? Troubleshot. Okay. If we try and work through the challenges together. One other thing I forgot with the Lost and Found. There's 2 pull-up banners. They are not other foundation banners, but there's 2 banners that were at the registration desk. So if you lost any banners, please just check registration. They might have it. All right, so today, in terms of our flow, we are moving to reinvention. We spent the past couple of days first unpacking the rollbacks that we've experienced in the past couple of years, what has happened in our individual context that we found particularly challenging, that have made things really difficult and affected our movement building work negatively. And then we moved to resilience, the conversation about resilience in the sense that, notwithstanding everything that has happened, we're still here, we're still standing. So what are those strategies, characteristics, traits that have helped us to remain intact, to remain, that have allowed us to stand in the gap, notwithstanding? And then already began the conversation about how we can use those strategies to inform our movement building work going forward. So today is at that point in the conversation when we're now looking to the future. Now that we've unpacked the rollbacks and we've unpacked how we've remained resilient notwithstanding, what are we going to do now to ensure that we guard against those rollbacks going forward, to ensure that we put in strategies and practices in place that will allow us to advance our collective movement building agenda, that will help us advance our organizing. So our first panel is going to introduce that element and kind of ground us already on what reinvention can and might look like. But of course, before we do that, we're going to watch videos from the past 2 days just to hear back on how we've been feeling, and then our esteemed panel will go ahead and start us off. Thank you everyone.
My name is Rosie Mutene. I am proudly African. I'm a feminist, I'm an activist. I'm also the co-chair of the other foundation, and I'm going to be facilitating this panel today. Before I introduce my esteemed panelists, I just wanted to also reflect a little bit more on the resilience from yesterday. I'm going to be a little bit graphic because the ferry trip, the boat trip, was very turbulent, to say the least. And it brought up a lot, literally and figuratively. And I mention this because that is what our resilience has been doing to a lot of us. That is what has killed so many of us. That is why many of us are walking and suffering silently because of this bile, because of this toxicity that we deal with in the work that we do. That's so important. But speaking from my point of view, and that's why I'm so glad that the rest of my panel is Pan-African, because we need to hear from other regions. But speaking from a South African perspective is that we've been told we're rocks. And yes, we're strong. Yes, we're powerful. But it took me a long time to really change that narrative about myself and say, actually, you know what? Excuse my language, today I'm not really feeling okay. I'm a bit fucked up today. Because we've been told that when you say, no, I'm tired or I need to rest, you're weak. We're not. Not everybody can do the work that we do. And the unfortunate thing at the moment, it's great that our campaigns are out there, that the work is out there, the hashtags are there, yeah. The flags are up when we need to do Ida Hot Day and so forth. But when it comes to calling out people in the boardroom or in your close environment or in your close community, people are very, very quick to turn a blind eye and then turn to the activists and say, actually, wait a minute, do your work. And that's fine, we'll do our work. But we're also at the stage where we can say, actually, no, I've been doing this work for a long time. We might not have that PhD, but we do have that intelligence. We have that experience. And if you want my voice, and if you want my work, you got to pay for it. And you got to respect it. And if I say to you, no, today I'm tired, I'm allowed to rest. And so we need to have this conversation and constantly look back at the resilience before we even move into the reinvention. And at some points it will overlap because then we're going to find new ways. But for me, my biggest thing is that when the younger ones that come through, I've been doing this for close to 18 years now, is that if somebody had told me in the beginning to say, please just look after yourself, I'm lucky, I'm still standing here. I speak from a place of privilege. There have been times where I was too down. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I had a house invasion. And seeking the mental health that I needed, I was fortunate that I had counselors I could call on. But there was one point where the counselor said, okay, you know, it might not be a bad idea for you to actually just be admitted just for a while to rest. No, I was okay with that. But because of the work that we do and because we're not compensated adequately, my medical aid doesn't cover that. And so for me to step into that type of place, that place of privilege, although I speak from a place of privilege, would have started at least 30,000 Rand. So as we have this conversation today and when we go out into our communities and push, one of the things that we really do need to push is that affordable healthcare for us. That top tier mental wellness healthcare for us, because that is what we need. And then just in closing, yesterday brought out a lot of emotions, as I said, and I've spoken to a few of our comrades, a few of our colleagues. If you're feeling angry and you're feeling painful, those emotions are valid. 100%. We are on an island where so much has happened in our history, but also so much has not been documented. And that energy is still living there, and for me, it's exactly a replica of what's happening with our families in South Africa, across the borders, and so forth. Those untold stories, those untold traumas, and so that is what we live with. So if you're not feeling okay, that's also okay. We've been trying to also keep with COVID protocols, and thank you for Kopano for mentioning that. If you are feeling a little bit chesty or whatever it is, please just reach out to one of the volunteers or the other foundation staff. I've personally requested just for them to get additional paracetamol, just additional care, look after yourselves. You're not being a burden if you think that you've got an itchy throat and you need a vitamin C, or if you just need a hug. You know, we're still here. We're tired, but we're still here. So with that, of course, I've got to open up with one of my favorite poets, Audre Lorde. She's even taking my voice away. And you know, I'm going to be biased here because over the years, the literature that's gotten me through so much has been from Black women. And that is why I'm so blessed that I've been able to travel the continent and then discover so much more literature, queer literature, learning about other people, because at the same time I speak from my space. As much as when I walk in that door, I need to create that space for a trans woman or a trans man or an intersex person. I'm not allowed to speak on their behalf, and I never will, but it's about opening up that space. And how I've been learning is through the literature. So my favorite quote is, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare." So I'm going to introduce my panel. So from Botswana, we have Mabato Motamai, who is an Afro-Lucianist person from Botswana, is a believer in African development through achieving environmental and social wellness through sustainable action, in appreciating the 8 pillars of peace. They work to ensure that all peace rooted in wellness speak to the development of in the continent as well as the diaspora. Give it up for Mabato from Botswana. Oh, come on, Botswana. And then moving to Zimbabwe, Trevor Molefe is from the Purple Hand Africa Zimbabwe, and quoted from Aurelium. I have to commend you for an amazing website that you do have. Quoted as saying, "Growing up as a gay man in Zimbabwe was challenging. As a young person, he was exposed to the hateful rhetoric of the former president, Robert Mugabe, who claimed lesbian and gay people are as worse as pigs and dogs. These statements reflect the attitude of the state, which has long persecuted lesbian, bisexual, transgender, intersex, and queer people." Please give it up for Trevor Molefe. Thank you. I'm going to ask you to excuse me here, and if I'm wrong, correct me, because remember, it's about reinvention and relearning. So is it Florence Kakas? Kakas. Okay, so we're learning from Namibia, who represents YFEM. Florence is a transformative African feminist leader and founder and executive director of YFEM Namibia Trust, which is a young feminist movement in Namibia, and it was founded in 2009 in Swakopmund. They started their work as an activist in the area of women's human rights of marginalized rural young women, including lesbians, in 2009. And then finally, from my hometown, we have Brian Sebeko Ngidi, who represents the Utingo Network South Africa. Brian has worked in the LGBT non-profit sector for over 11 years in coordination and managerial positions, and is a former board chairperson of the network. In that role, he was a fellow board member to create a turnaround strategy and played a crucial part in securing additional funding for the organization's programmatic work across the province. So important word, there's funding, guys. You've got to speak to Brian, yeah. Give it up for, please, Brian Ngidi from South Africa. Thank you so much. So to start the conversation, mental well-being has so many different meanings in different regions. And so we were going to move away from the South African context, and we'll start with Botswana. What does it mean for you? Even before we even go there, just tell us a little bit more about yourself, what you do, and what you want to add a little bit more to the space, and then we'll go into, what mental wellness means per region.
All right. I don't know, is my mic on? Am I audible? Okay, hi everyone. My name is Mabato Motamai, she and they pronouns. I work in the advocacy space, adopting SDG 17 being Partnership for Human Rights. So I engage with different regional NGOs, some national, and work along advocacy for human rights within those spaces. And I've also been in the board of the National Youth Council and other international and regional organizations. Yeah, thank you.
So in terms of from Botswana, what does mental wellness mean in this context as an activist?
Yeah, first in the context of activism and mental health, let me preface by saying that activists aren't, they're invisibilized in many ways. So first of all, I believe that activists are care workers, and engaging in care work of governance and upholding, as part of accountability mechanisms that uphold human rights for the state and for the international and regional spaces. So we're care workers around human rights, right? And a lot of activists face mental health issues based on social and economic stresses, and have social and economic determinants to even be able to work. So being attacked by police, being attacked by state forces, those are the very determinants that other people in other industries don't get to experience that activists do. So the nature of their mental health spaces are fundamentally different and unique from everybody else.
Absolutely.
Right? And in terms of the kind of mental health access that's available in Botswana, we do have state provisions of telecommunication counseling and other free healthcare services. And we also have, because of the stigma and still dealing with queer phobia from those specific spaces, yes, we've decriminalized, but there's a difference between legislative work and public opinion and public socialization. So queer NGOs, clubs, and different spaces are burdened with having to provide mental health care for other persons of the public, and having the responsibility to be in community with themselves, right? So due to that burdening, there actually is little access and availability for mental health services for activists. And the reality is substances such as alcohol and drugs come in to replace that. Drugs and alcohol are way more accessible, a lot more affordable, and they do give temporary relief to social and economic stresses. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're healthy. That's just the reality on the ground.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Before we move on, remember we're in a space where we're totally Pan-African, and so people aren't being disrespectful by talking. It's just a lot of the translations. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, because it came up yesterday that people were talking over other people. They're not being, if you are hearing murmuring or people talking, majority of the time it is somebody translating so that everybody can get the message across. So moving to Trevor, tell us a little bit more about the work that you do in your space, and what does mental wellness mean for you in your environment?
Okay, so basically I'm working mostly in mental wellness in Zimbabwe, and the thing is, you find that when it comes to the African people in general, we actually do not believe that much in sitting with a counselor and sharing whatever we'll be going through. So that's what I discovered, even with myself. So we use nature, we use writing, and we also use art as a coping technique. And we mostly do this with the LGBTQI plus people from the rest of the country. And to strengthen the peer-to-peer support, we bring people from different parts of the country together. And I've noticed that, you know what, in as much as we have counselors and psychologists in almost all organizations, but still, they are not able to reach out to the people in the rural areas or the hard-to-reach areas. And so that's where we also try to bring in people also from the rural communities, but not just by themselves, but also bringing them together with the urban folks. Because you find that our struggles, some of them are similar, even though in differing levels. So coming in such spaces, sharing stories, sharing your lived experiences, then they're able to heal and go back to the communities as different people. But also at the same time, speaking about myself, I'm one person that always tries to get into almost everything. I don't like to box myself. And whenever I work, I always try not to be defined by my sexuality, but by my abilities. And so that is something that I always try to push on to the other LGBTQI plus people. And with that, I think, I'll share more as we go along.
Thank you so much. Florence, tell us a little bit more about the amazing work that you do. And then of course, what does mental wellness mean to you and in your immediate space?
Okay. I started my activism very young. I think I was about 18 years old when I was very concerned about queer youth and bullying. And activism found me that way, so I somehow grew up in this movement until the point that I'm here in my mid-30s. And one thing that I've realized is there's a lot of struggles that queer youth are facing in terms of navigating themselves within the civil society space. The previous generation, there's this huge gap between the younger generation and the previous generation who have been very much driven by work. And we came into the space and we were somehow expected to do that same thing. And we didn't realize the impact it has on our bodies and our survival within the movement.
Yeah.
And that made me realize that we need to do more. We need to do more in terms of to create that space for really nurturing and supporting younger activists in terms of leadership. What does it mean to be a leader within your community? Does it mean that you have to just selflessly give yourself away while your cup is empty? What does it mean for us to lead? So that is why I've dedicated so much of my life to really supporting activists in terms of finding their soul within their movement and not to allow the expectations of the broader movement to influence the direction that they want to go, but for them to create that space and time to go within themselves and to tap into awareness, to build that consciousness about the environment that we are living in, which is extremely toxic. So when we talk about our mental health, there are so many factors that impacts us. The environment that we live in, the communities that we are in, and the struggles that we are facing collectively and as individuals. So that has really brought me into this space of movement building and really working in terms of mental health. And from the Namibian perspective, I would say that there is so many barriers in terms of young queer people to access mental health services. If sexual reproductive health and rights are already a struggle for us to access, these institutional barriers that are there, what does it mean for our mental health? So as organizations, as the Young Feminist Movement, we have been trying to constantly innovate ourselves, to ask ourselves those questions, what more can we do? And we are at the place right now where we are thinking about indigenous feminism. What did our mothers do to heal themselves and to support themselves?
Wow.
And these conversations having with our mothers to say, like, be in the sun, be in the soil, take the soil and plant something and eat it. So that is where we are at, where we are having this conversations with our mothers, intergenerational conversations to say, here's some seeds for you. You can go plant that. So indigenous feminism, which is not governed by anything else but tapping into the information that we have from our generations and really looking at what does healing justice mean for us as the queer movement. Because healing justice is a movement that is taking something from all the movements that we have, the HIV movement, the sexual reproductive movement, the disability justice movement, to say that what are the factors within our society such as racism and landlessness that is impacting our well-being for us to thrive in life.
And I love the fact that intergenerational approach, one of the things of particularly with the pandemic, of healing from COVID was that vitamin D. And it wasn't the vitamin D you buy from Dis-Chem or Clicks, it's if you sit out in the sun during the day. And I love that aspect. And I think we'll tap into that a little bit more as we go along. So Brian, from your point of view, please tell us a little bit more about yourself. And then, of course, what does mental wellness be in your immediate environment?
Okay. It's a bit of I think, an interesting topic, right? But it's also used as a buzzword, like decolonization and all of that. We don't necessarily ensure. It's like we all talk about the Constitution, but on paper, it's on paper, but in reality, there is nothing. That's what we're doing with, mental wellness or wellness as a whole. We are a human rights organization, or we are, advocates. We are known for being disruptive and reinventing. And for me, I still don't understand why in our work we, employ capitalist, approaches of doing our work. What business do we have with being at work from 9 to 5 as activists? And for me, COVID has, during COVID, the first hard lockdown, I could, take a walk in the morning with my partner and our son. And we could explore so much. And I'm thinking, oh, this is how life should be. This work-life balance, what does it mean? Like, how does it look like? For example, we're not paid enough. We all know that. We struggle to make ends meet. We retire without any funds. We die paupers. At least, let me work until 2 o'clock and then I can figure myself out after 2 o'clock. We always look at mental wellness or wellness as a physical aspect, but it entails a lot of more aspects, spirituality, and finance being the most important one, because with finance, you can take care of all the other, components or aspects of wellness. We spend a lot of time, or most of our lives, working. At least let the workspaces not be toxic. Let us be taken care of, because if you spend 80% of your life in a toxic workspace, it means your wellness is messed up. It means you're always burnt out. And this whole idea of activism being selflessness, we need to reconsider that. Because the more selfless you are, the more exposed to abuses you get. It's like in any relationship, the more subordinate you are, the more violated and abused you are. So let's reconsider that. Take care of yourself. Be selfish with your time. Be selfish with...
And it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a director who sends you an email, a work email at 11 o'clock in the evening. And they say, oh no, the intention was not for you to respond. Of course I'm going to want to respond. Of course I'm going to want to prove myself to you. We talk about wellness. Do we even understand that wellness means that you need to, capacitate your employees to be able to perform their tasks? Because there's an idea which happens, and we know it happens within the movement, that the director holds all the opportunities, and your team members cannot perform. And then tomorrow you say, oh, so-and-so is underperforming, but are you giving them the resources to perform? Because with me not being able to perform, it means I will have work-related stress. I won't be a happy employee, and now I end up bleeding on the wrong people. I end up, being considered an angry activist without really trying to unpack where does the anger come from. So I think wellness is holistic, but most of it has to do with money. Thanks.
And I mean, you spoke about the toxicity, and I'm going to reflect back to, somebody got an Instagram message. I'm going to reflect back to what one of our comrades said yesterday about going into toxic spaces, but also working with, in those toxic environments. And then also we mustn't forget that between us as colleagues, particularly when we go into a safe space, is that we need to be intentional about not being toxic towards each other. Because it doesn't only have that effect on our emotional well-being, but then also for the organizations that we work with. So moving on dealing with trauma, because we know that trauma doesn't disappear, it is with us. We've got to create coping mechanisms. I'll start with Zimbabwe. Would you mind sharing, if possible, certain coping mechanisms that you might use in your immediate environment, or that you do know of, so that we can share and possibly learn a little bit more from that?
Okay, so generally, this is what we always try to push for, because paper doesn't judge you. And the good thing about paper is that you can tell paper anything, and you can heal yourself. So interesting enough, one of the activities that we normally do is writing your pain a letter, whereby you get to express all the trauma, everything that you've experienced, and no matter how emotional it gets, but at least then you're able to also respond to yourself and able to find a way forward. So at the end of the day, it's not just about talking about your pain, but it's about finding solutions. And I believe that the solutions actually lie in us. So.
Powerful, thank you. Florence, let's touch a little bit more on the work that you're doing on the intergenerational approach, and also what coping mechanisms are you using, and if you've learned anything from the elders.
Yes, I've learned quite a lot. I've learned the importance of being still in the midst of the chaos. Because when COVID reached, it was chaotic. When our presidents told us we are now going into lockdown, nobody should move, nobody should go to an office or anything, we were wondering, what do we do next? So it was a scary place because we didn't even have access to getting permits to be able to go to different areas to see what kind of support we can give. So having the privilege of having access to the internet was really helpful in order for us to build that connection with each other, to be able to speak to each other, because within our organization we really strongly believe in solidarity as a tool for us to show love to each other. We don't want to fight anymore. We realize that we have been fighting for generations, and we are tired. We don't want to fight anymore. We want to heal. We want to be led by love. And I think that is something that the elders are teaching us, because we work on issues of dismantling gender norms, these harmful narratives which is in our societies that are telling us that you are not supposed to live your life the way we do. But we decided that we are entering those spaces, such as the church, that has been harmful to us for generations as queer women, and we are saying that we are reclaiming our bodily autonomy and integrity in this space called the church that has been hurting and abusing us for generations. We are saying that we are claiming back, and we are saying that we are loving ourselves, and we belong in the church even. Because church has been that institution that has chased us away because of our queerness. And we are saying that we need spirituality even in this time of chaos. And we would say that, yes, we will enter these spaces, and we'd had this conversation, and we'll build these strategies with our mothers within the church. And they have been the ones who have been at the forefront of advocating for us within their community to say that we need to love ourselves more. And coming a little bit back to some of the strategies that our organization is having is the importance of organizational, occupational well-being. What does that mean for us to take care of ourselves and our team? Things such as, when we are feeling that we are not feeling okay, we'll stay home. We'd encourage our team to at least just work 3 days in a week, because the cost of going to work, the oil prices have gone up. It's expensive. Things such as, if you're living in the city, it's very expensive. So we'd be like, okay, here is a stipend for your housing allowance. Even though we are not able to provide medical aid, we'd say, okay, let's do research and to see which are the institutions that we can approach. Coming to the point of donors, COVID-19 has taught us how toxic some donors can be in terms of their expectations. There would be times that I would, because of the expectations of donors, stay up late, throughout the whole night, doing some financial documents, because...
And sometimes it's different time zones.
Yes, different time zones. It has been exhausting. While you're supposed to attend a family funeral, you are here working because you have to meet the deadlines. And as an organization, as a team, we have told ourselves we have to create boundaries, even if it's uncomfortable. Even if we do not have money, sometimes we are not going to work with certain type of donors that are, expecting us to be super people. So we have told ourselves we'll look for donors that are understanding our values as an organization, and that understand the importance for us to take care of ourselves. And we are still in the process of saying no to some funding.
And that's so important, because it's about being intentional about putting what you put out there. And one of the other things is looking back at the how to reinvent and change the way we've been doing and everything, because normally, the approach is the African going, cap in hand, please can you help me? But we're holding the power, we're holding the intelligence, we're holding what they need. So it's about, directing that narrative. And of course, when we talk about how toxic it can be in the way we operate, and if you don't mind, maybe elaborating a little bit on that, and then Brian also, because we all have been colonized, but I know from South Africa, we still many are still struggling with even just mentioning that word. So.
Maybe I actually wanted to add on a few points from what was shared by Flo, particularly around colonization of minds, and the languaging that continuously gets co-opted by the West. I think for us, when I see in terms of how we mitigate mental instability, the working model that I've noticed is being in community with other activists and building trust within spaces. So even having friendships, practicing intimacy of friendships and of community, because just as African people, mutuality, boto, are one of our strong value systems, right? And I'm going to come from a religious perspective. It's Pan-African, because I'm a child of the ancestors.
Amen.
And for me, my spiritual and religious practice within African traditional religion has been a very cathartic experience, especially when I'm facing pain, because I get to feel that sense of spiritual community. So for those who are who are like myself, or who are of that practice, understand how cathartic that is, or that has been, at least for me. But when it comes to decolonization, the first major issue is how easy it is for neoliberal systems to keep and continuously co-opting all of our knowledge, all of like African feminism, the women, everything just keeps being co-opted and we end up losing our own relationship with the ideology, let alone the word. And I think that's because a lot of philanthropists and donors who are claiming to not work within a neoliberal framework uphold and value colonialism and coloniality like it's that baby. You know what I mean? And I think we need to start pushing towards looking for more accountability, or more funders who are within the African philanthropic space. Because there are a lot of African-based donors that are, instead of focusing on human rights issues, are leaning towards entrepreneurship and not seeing the global broadness of economic justice, right? And I think it's important for us to start moving towards African funders as to trying to change the minds of the West. Now, guys, I don't know how long we can change their minds for. We're running out of time. But essentially, it is that building community from within the activist spaces, but also looking towards social and economic interventions that can help relieve some of our own social stresses, because honestly, you can't journal and therapy your way out of unemployment. You can't therapy your way out of poverty. But some of these stresses, and also ensuring that we have more flexible funding. I found out recently that, and it was a shock to me, that activists in Europe can go on a retreat and actually retreat. They just go bowling and they swim. When we go for a retreat, we have to have a convening. We have to have something.
We're working.
I want to be a babe. And I think it's okay for African activists to also have their own hot girl summer and be funded.
And go to spas and things like that, springs. Ryan, from your perspective,
I think, fine, we're doing powerful work, right? We're doing important work, but it comes with a lot of distress. It comes with a lot of pain and a lot of hate, directed towards us and the communities that we serve. And when I took over, I think I need to also, there's nothing wrong with privilege. It's just a matter of how do you use your privilege. Do you use it against or, to the benefit of those who are less privileged? So I took over from an organization which was, led by a white gay man. And we know the privilege if you're white, if you're a man. So luckily, I don't know how it happened, and I know it doesn't happen for most organizations. There's money for retreats. For example, next month we're going on a full retreat with hiking, quad biking, all the works that you can think of.
The whole enchilada.
The whole shebang. But the money was not used for that. Because I think also, some directors are always in the office, they don't even understand the kind of context that you work in, to a point where they see these things as a luxury. For example, 3 weeks after taking over, I gave everyone a 2-day wellness break. The messages I received from people within the sector: do you even know what you're doing? Do you guys even work that hard enough to even deserve this wellness break? And I was like, number one, we are young. We will do things differently. If the olden ways work for you, clearly they're not working for us, and they will never work for us going forward.
Amen.
This thing, why should we overwork ourselves? I have a son, right? I need to be able to go and watch him play, rugby. I went to a rugby match last week, which it didn't even look like a rugby match, but the fact that I was there, you know, because you need to balance our lives. I need to be able to be there for my son, for my husband. I can't be there for the community that I serve whilst I abandon my life. Because where do I go to after all the stresses? Like I was talking about privilege again. I'm privileged enough to afford medical aid. I don't think I would have been able to if I was single. Privilege comes from my partner as well because he's outside the movement. But a lot of people that I work with do not have all these resources, right? They don't have anything. So if I need to tweak a bit of the, budget lines and stuff like that, trust me, I'm doing that. Funders require us to have a timesheet. I don't like that idea. What are you saying? We're not working hard enough. All the funders who are here, I'm sorry, we cook up our timesheets. Because at the end of the day, sometimes you work 2 hours a day, but you cover 9 hours worth of work.
Yeah.
So who are you to tell me that I'm not working hard? And the Americans love telling you, you're not putting enough energy into this funding. Like, who are you?
Because there's already trauma attached to the work that you're doing, even if it's just
we
reading.
work with rural, in rural communities, we work with traditional leaders and religious leaders. That space is very toxic. I remember one of the days we were working with religious leaders, and one of them said, I actually rejoice when a gay person is murdered because God is doing his work. Right? So you might think I'm not affected, but I'm there. I'm part of the community. So then you go back to work. And they laugh about it. These things happen. Because they don't even understand the context. So I've started as a peer educator, worked for myself over the ranks. I understand, and I'm not bringing my own horn. I think sometimes our leaders are, not in touch with reality because they don't know the hard work. All they do is fundraise, give you the money, and question, why are you spending on this and that? For example, we have a budget for wellness or whatever, but the only thing we can afford is debriefing sessions. What about other, psychological issues that need, more specialized care?
The prevention of suicide, the depression that we're dealing with.
Our office cleaner sometimes, speaks, alone, and people are like, oh, she's crazy, she needs to leave. I'm like, did you even try to understand why she reacts like this? It's easy to be dismissed in the movement than, being understood. And I think we need to reinvent how we work. And I'm in that process, and I know it's not a popular decision or a process. And I might lose funding for that matter. But, the board might even, chuck me out because some of them think I'm making unpopular decisions. But I know there's a need for such things. We need to take care of ourselves. And let's stop talking about...
But I'm also going to stop you there because you said something, and it's also about the self-talk that we have. So you said, I don't mean to blow my own horn. Blow it.
Okay, let me blow it.
Because you are, the thing is you are doing the work. You are walking the walk.
Perhaps let me stop being modest. I think it's all this whole idea of selflessness, Yeah, we were taught not to.
But you are intelligent.
Not to acknowledge who we are. We are power. The fact that we are here and we're still standing. As much as I don't, love the whole agency and resilience talk, because we also fail to unpack the issues that make us to be resilient. We always look at the end result without checking. For you to be resilient or agentic, how did you get there? Or what makes you be, resilient? But I think we need to change how we do things. Our funders need to be here and listen. There's one question they always ask you when you apply for funding. What is your sustainability plan, right? Why don't you ask me, what is...
It's you.
What is my... No. Also, ask me a question. What is your plan to sustain the wellness of your employees? Because at the end of the day, they are the ones who do the work. You give me money for programs. What about money for medical aid, for retirement plans and all of that? We work with, some of my staff members are PhD candidates. And if you pay them 25,000 rands, what are you saying? We need money to maintain talent. Otherwise, these people will leave. We are tired of working because of our passion, and we are tired. We are tired.
And the reinvention also means reinventing and changing the narrative. So we work in different toxic spaces and we deal, the horrific things that have been said to us. If it's okay, and if you don't want to talk about it, that's also okay. But how have you changed or dealt with those type of narratives? And the reason why I'm asking this is that there might be somebody in the room that deals with this all the time but doesn't know how to change it without stooping to that person's level, if I'm making sense. Does anybody want to share on how you deal with negative narratives and try to change perceptions of that negativity and toxicity?
With yourself or from society or both?
Both, yeah.
Okay, so we will always face all kinds of resistance. I know that just the fact of calling myself a feminist in every given space that I go in, I would be questioned and I would be called names. But then, you know, what keeps me going is having emotional boundaries from what I take from society, because sometimes as, you know, caregivers, people that work within this community of really working with people that are hurting and people that are not coming to terms with what they are, you know, you face all kinds of resistance and all kinds of words, but you need to really do inner work with yourself. I know not everybody can afford therapy, but what can you do? What did our ancestors do? How are we creating that space and time to talk to our ancestors? It is deep like that. You know, I remember there was this point in time where I felt like I was at my lowest when I was like, you know, I'm quitting this activism. We always say that when we're alone. Like, I'm so done with this.
I'm done.
Yep.
And then I decided, you know what, I'm gonna do whatever I need to do to connect with my people. How did my great-grandmothers go through adversity? What struggles did they have? And I realized that we need to create that time for ourselves, to talk to ourselves, to talk to our great people, and to heal ourselves. It is really important, because if you are like a sponge absorbing everything that the society is giving us, we won't have anything left. So I liked that yesterday where Sis Libo was talking about what Audre Lorde was saying about the erotica. I love the erotica because it says that even that messy parts about ourselves, it is creating something beautiful.
Yep.
You know, we need to embrace the erotica in every sense of the way we look, the way we think, the way we walk, the way we eat, the way we dance, the way we love, the way we celebrate ourselves and the movement that we are part of. It is erotica because we are creating something that has never been there. Just the mere thought of thinking about it, the thought of imagining, you know, the queer African movement, how it is going to become stronger and beautiful, where we are not just talking about our struggles, but talking about how powerful we are within ourselves, how much of a genius we are, how much of healers we are, how in the past days, before colonialization, we were actually embraced by our society. We were important people. We played important roles within our society. Yeah. What if we go back to that? What if we tap into our imagination?
Yeah. And also we need to document a lot more.
Yes.
Of course.
In your space, Trevor, I mean, you know, when you're looking into stats across Africa, particularly when it comes to LGBTQI, there's a lot of stats about white gay men. But there's that deliberate erasure of the rest of us. In your space, how are you narrating through the toxicity, and are you also documenting just in your own way?
Okay, so generally, firstly, it's in the programming, I think. We are all being erased. For example, in Zimbabwe, whenever we talk about LGBT issues, we are normally just referred to as key population, or men who have sex with men, and hence it is degrading us, not really degrading us, but it is focusing only on the sexual side and not on myself as a human and what I'm also providing and contributing to society. So what we've been doing in general as People and Africa is that we've also been going around the country and just getting narratives of people, like taking videos of people speaking their own lived experiences, as well as just sharing ways in which the LGBT community is also contributing to the development of the nation. No matter how much they keep bringing us down, but still we're here and we exist. And that's what we've just been doing, just sharing our narratives as explicit as they are.
But it's as true as they are.
As true as they are, and in all the beauty of our diversity as they are,
in terms of negative narratives, I'll maybe place it in the context of queer activist spaces. I had to learn how to mitigate being in conflict with myself, and also conflict management within my community, within spaces. Because the reality is that because of all these social and economic stresses, we take it out on each other in different ways. So sometimes we can be exploitative within our working spaces. Sometimes our relationships as queer activists go sour.
Yeah.
And the people who I was in relationships with 3 years ago coming to this convening, I'm not in speaking terms with today. Very practically speaking, I'm not subtweeting anyone.
Disclaimer. But speak your truth.
But honestly, I think we need to learn conflict resolution. We need to learn how to apologize, but we also need to learn how to forgive each other. I think it's really easy to, because of the toxic environments, it's really easy to weaponize some of our negative experiences and then share them with other people as to, you know, the actual healing justice that comes within understanding that with forgiveness does come atonement, and if somebody is behaving differently, it means that they have atoned, right? So I think it's the learning, the intimate and collective learning of conflict management, resolution, forgiveness,
and also holding each other accountable. It's not about separating, but when we so used to being in a toxic way, lashing out in a toxic way, it can be very easy, and it's often just like, whoa, what you did was this and this, or you hurt me, and you're allowed to feel that. But if you're gonna be, if you don't want to be held accountable, you know, then that's where the issue is taken to another level.
but this obviously definitely takes time.
Yeah.
Eventually, I think the movement hopefully can move in that direction. However, there are external factors of, as we spoke of, donor requirements that tend to create toxic environments within specific spaces. But hopefully, eventually, with the intimate and community work, we can slowly move towards a more nurturing space.
Yeah. Another thing that I wanted to bring up was that the social media impact, and it works very well in certain regions, and it doesn't work in other regions. And one of my learning and unlearning that I did was that I moved into another part of Africa thinking I could operate the same way as I do as a South African, not realizing that I could be doing a lot more damage and harm in that environment. And I was called in, you know, because I moved to Uganda, and suddenly my Uganda activist was like, we don't trust you, you work for a media network. And I was able to take that back and then regroup and understand. From your perspectives, I'm asking because from learning, because I'm online a lot, but I'm online from a place of privilege. What can we do and what shouldn't we do if it's online, about saying certain things within your spaces? I'll start with Zimbabwe, if you don't mind.
Okay, so in general, when it comes to social media, in Zimbabwe it is quite, okay, it is still, it's not for everyone who's out of the closet, and there's so much intolerance. So whenever we use social media, I think it's always best to just put into consideration consent from the other party.
That's the key.
And in as much as we want to get our stories out there, but we also need to protect identities as well. And so I think we need to at least, you know, at times blurring or even distorting some voices, and just making sure that we still get the stories out there, but protecting people as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And Namibia, I mean, you know, one of the stories that we did pick up, it wasn't really related to LGBTQI, but it was somebody in Parliament talking about marital rape. And that was one thing that we could pick up and then carry the conversation going forward. Are there any mechanisms that we shouldn't be doing, or any things that we should be pushing? Because what is really beautiful that I'm watching is this young feminist movement from Namibia, and the rallying that we're trying to put behind you. But we also know the danger that it lies. So we want to provide that lucrative protection. And then also, look, I'm not saying that we can provide asylum in South Africa, but then if it comes to that situation, you know, what are the possibilities?
it's really true. When we talk about human rights defenders in Namibia, we are doing the work. It might not be enough, but we do not have system in place when an activist is in danger when it comes to safety and security.
Yeah.
And as a movement, we've been having these conversations in spaces that we are coming together. We are saying we need to do more in order to strengthen the human rights defenders movement, to say what would happen. And currently in a country, we are, as activists, we are concerned about the state surveillance of what we say and how we speak in spaces. We are very concerned about that and what that impact has. And I would say, as we are moving forward as a broader movement, we need to really, when it comes to the work of our organizations, we need to tap into what does ICT means, having access to information, and how we are using technology. What systems are we putting into place in our organizations to ensure that we are protected? I know, like last year, I was having a situation whereby my email account was hacked and then emails were sent. It was because of a civil society organization, one of the staff members, their account was hacked, and then somehow, they wrote to me, and then mine was also hacked. And as an organization, we decided we need to really have ICT policy whereby we are, protecting ourselves as activists when we are online. And we decided that, we are not going to use any more Gmail accounts because we are concerned about our safety. So we decided we are going to get private email accounts. And then again, we had another struggles whereby we were concerned about the data that we have within our organization. How are we protecting ourselves and the data of our organization in terms of institutional memory and all of those things? How do we address issues of theft when somebody steals your laptop or something like that? And it got us to think within the organization, how are we protecting ourselves digitally, and how are we protecting our organization, and how are we protecting ourselves when we're thinking we are in threat? So as a movement, we are at a place as a country where we are building alliances with other queer organizations and feminist organizations because we work quite intersectionally. And we realize that we need to protect each other, we need to support each other, we need to come up with systems whereby when we feel that we are into threat, we can know that, no, I can call my colleague at this organization in order to support us. So those are some of the conversations we are having as a community.
You also just reminded me of another platform, so in another region across Africa, where certain discussions need to be had, and of course, the government control what is out on the net. And so, as a collective, certain feminists in South Africa are setting up the podcast systems and then getting the information to us and then loading it off from South Africa, so it comes from another region. I'm doing the documentary on Dr. Stella Nyanzi, and we knew that getting the footage from Uganda to South Africa, if my name was attached, it would never come here. So we had to send it via, but that was only because we had the communications, we had the relationships from people who could help us on those different regions. So that's also just another way of reaching out. Mabato, your opinion on what can be done perhaps on the social media space?
I think there needs to be more maybe knowledge, studying and appreciation within our own groups on the infringement of social media, internet governance in general. I think coming from country to country, a lot of African countries tend to place social media policies as a response to people online critiquing governments. So I think there needs to be a lot more studying around this infringement, but also appreciation and sharing of digital media applications that do have a lot of encrypted coding with data protection and people who are not selling data online. So I think it's just really around knowledge, studying, knowledge generation and learning within each other as NGOs,
And from your point of view, Brian?
Yeah, I think social, I don't know, since contexts are different, right? For me, in my experience, social media didn't have much power also.
Okay.
And also sometimes I think we need to ask ourselves as organizations, when we share these stories, who's the target audience? Because sometimes, how is the community going to learn or understand something if the story is created in such a way that it appeals more to the funder, to the donors? Because I think in most cases, we are more concerned with sharing information, disseminating information to attract, funding. And we end up now not really, it's also portraying the reality, or end up not reaching, important stakeholders or people whom we want to know the stories, because stories are very important and powerful. But if it's not portrayed in a good way, it becomes useless.
Absolutely.
And you might even think South Africa is a bit relaxed in terms of hacking and all of that. I'll give you a personal experience. I was working on an MSM project, and we're using social media to recruit our participants. It was a study. And one evening I received an email from someone who, I don't know, who managed to get hold of my database, all the recruited participants. And they demanded money, of course. Because the threat was that if you don't give me this amount of money, I'm going to speak to the ethics board and say, data was not stored appropriately.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think we really need systems in place. But the sad part about our organizations, we need funding to have systems in place. But some funders are a bit reluctant to give you money for other things which they don't see as important. But in reality, I think we need more flexible funding which we can use as we see fit. There's a need for core funding. I think with core funding, we can achieve a lot as organizations.
And especially now because of the amazing hashtags that corporates and everyone else are picking up, is that be intentional of what you need. So if somebody wants to be an ally and works in ICT, is creating these type of platforms. I'm working with a legal firm now on just legal terminology and jargon that we can and cannot use online. So, I've received many so-called defamation letters and shut up, we're going to do this type of thing to you. Some of them I've ignored, some of them have been serious, but now I know that, the alleged, without the inverted commas, keeps me safe. So it's a small thing like that, when you are perhaps writing proposals or you're approaching other corporate entities or bodies, is be intentional of what you need. So, okay, you're a legal firm, this is what you can give us, as opposed to expecting us to do free work for your legal firm, because after that, and that is something that we can also share. We are just about running over time. Are there any questions or comments from the audience? Is over there, and then we can start wrapping up. Are there any other ones? And then you can use this mic. Okay. Could you please just, if it's okay with you, your name, pronoun, and region you're from?
Morning, my name is Linda Bowman. I'm from Namibia, and I'm sitting up there. I live in the township of Katutura, and the language you're using is very privileged, very classism, because you guys are exposed to it. So I'm trying to figure out how do we speak to the language of the urban child, the rural child, because mental health language doesn't exist for me in my township. I'm depressed. I'm angry, I want to die. Those are the words that we are hearing from our own people. So how do we really make sure that we descend to the language that our people need? I get irritated when people talk about safety and security and you want to fly me, book me into a hotel. Rather than, instead of paying a little back room that I can stay for the next 8 months in there, where I have my own space of serenity, instead of paying $800 per night. And I think those issues of safety and security, we are still colonized by these white people. The resources we are talking about is the very same resources they stole from us because we are following the white man's language. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that honesty and true reflection. Would anybody on the panel like to address in terms of accessing, and it doesn't necessarily have to be just Namibia, but accessing the rural spaces, because that is the true reality. And so thank you very much for that.
Okay. Thank you, Linda, for that. So I think, yeah, of course, I always acknowledge my privilege. I think I also mentioned this earlier on.
Yeah.
I also mentioned, I think, the most important thing is what do you do with your privilege, right? Yeah, so, and we are in this space. I think we speak a language that most people in this space understand. And of course, when we go out there, I'm talking from our organization, right? We work in KwaZulu-Natal and the language is isiZulu. Whatever work that we do is in isiZulu. I mean, for example, on Tuesday we had one of the funders, who came to do a site inspection and whatever. And the order was that when you go out there, don't speak in English. That SRHR, whatever, keep to whatever language you've been using. It does. If they want us to translate, we'll translate at the end of the session. So, I mean, when we're sitting here, you assume that when we go out there, we use the same language. That's not the reality. I think we wouldn't be successful as organizations if we did that. We talk the language. We go, to the extent where we are on the same level with the participants or communities that we work with. But I'm speaking for I don't know how you guys operate, but I know that when we go out there, we speak the language. I mean, you won't go to a traditional leader who's highly cultural and speaking English. They won't give you the buy-in. There'll always be a gatekeeper. So the fact that
they won't even listen to you.
No, they won't. Yeah. So the fact that we continuously, get into spaces where people like myself wouldn't actually have access to it means that we are doing the right thing.
I just wanted to I think what Linda said is important for deep reflection because it's a call to decolonize English.
Of course,
And if you think about it deeply, it's been decolonized before. Nigerians have pidgin, Jamaicans have patois, and so on and so forth. And I think it's also important for us because, yes, we do have our language. For me, in Setswana, we'll have tidilo maikutlo, huipetsa, but it's still seen as a formal light in terms of reaching out to young people, right? And so I think we need to also reflect and analyze our relationship with accents. Yes. That's the critical issue. Because I think our downfall is we learn the jargon and we use the jargon. And instead of being comfortable with the language that we already have that does exist. I remember the video asking what our languages, what gay means in our different languages that's affirming. And I think that still centers English as an understanding. And instead of us centering, did we even need to create markers? Culturally, we're not descriptive. We don't use markers of identification of human beings. In Setswana, we have they, them pronouns for everyone, and the gender is coming into different roles. So I think it's more like a call. I took it as a call, Linda, for me personally to declass the jargon in which even the word jargon, hey? The nature of my languaging, but I think beyond that, it's about relatability and centering my actual culture and not enculturing English into my indigenous.
Thank you for that.
In our work, almost every time whenever we start anything, we always say English is not my mother. And hence, it opens that space where people are able to speak in any language that they feel comfortable in. And another thing which I think, which we did in Zimbabwe was that we created a dictionary where everything that is queer has been translated into the local languages.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
wow.
brilliant.
That's amazing.
We sometimes work with the radio, and we mostly focus on indigenous radio stations in order for us to reach communities that we often do not reach, the rural communities. So we go onto radio and we talk about, these important issues. So I think it is, as an organization, as YFM, we are very radical and unapologetic about our indigenous languages and the way we use it, to a point whereby even those platforms that we create on our social media, such as in COVID-19 when we had to create spaces where we are convening online, would intentionally do it in our local languages. And it was beautiful in the sense because it was something that we were creating that was not there before, and we are like, we need to do this more. We want to inspire more young people to embrace their mother tongues, because if we do not do that, where are we going as a community?
And I mean, you know, from a personal point of view, that is one of the biggest things that I've struggled with, because I was never brought up with my mother tongue. And it's incredibly important, and I'm going to mention this in the room, for families who are going to be adopting across the racial barriers, particularly if you're going to be adopting an African child. Our language has so much power, it's connected to everything. I stand here in honesty because I've been lost for so long because I didn't have that connection. And so to Linda, thank you again for that call to action. And then another point which you also made is that looking at the safety and security policies, this is another thing that can be put into proposals, that it's not about extracting somebody from their space unless they need to, unless it's necessary, but it's also providing those necessary safety and security protocols that are comfortable and what people really want and what people need in their immediate environment. So I see here, I see VG, and then at the top. Please introduce yourself and what region you come from.
Yeah, my name is Jones. I'm coming from the University of Malawi, and I do the work of research on the topic of LGBTIQ. I would like to make a contribution in regard to the question of mental health or mental well-being of us as activists and the LGBTIQ people. To say that the context in which we are working, mainly the African context, sub-Saharan African context, is a context in which we place ourselves in the front line. And in that front line context, we are the first to be fired by homophobia. We are interfacing with various issues which makes us to be constantly exposed to vulnerability as far as mental health issues are concerned. What I've discovered is that mental health in relation to LGBTIQ discourse in sub-Saharan Africa, research is showing that there is an increase of mental health issues among the LGBTIQ communities in sub-Saharan Africa. And one of the reasons also that is determining factor for this phenomenon is that there is an interface between the LGBTIQ community and the LGBTI community in general with homophobia, either be it manifesting in verbal abuse, physical violence, policy barriers, brutal killings, whether it be corrective rape, traumatic experiences, rejection from family and society at large. So all these, when brought together, and you are the one who is absorbing them, what the impact it makes to you as an individual, I think the intensity is broader than others who are not part of the community.
Yeah.
So because of that, I think us who are working with the community or inside the community, I think there is need maybe to minimize our exposure firstly, and also to find means and ways in which we can be able to maneuver, but lessening the impact of exposure. So it is calling for research, more research to be done, and the production of knowledge. How do we link that knowledge to the programming that we are doing? There should be a link between research and programming, or in other words, research and activism. The findings that are coming out of research, how do we mainstream them into our various programmings? Thanks so much.
Thank you. And also, thank you. You know, in terms of the mainstreaming of that research, because the exposure could be dangerous in certain areas, and that is where the Pan-African connections come in, where if you can't do it in your country, do it in a country that could have a safer platform. Any comments or anything from the panel?
Yeah, so in my other life, I'm an academic, right? This whole idea of research, we do conduct research, right? But is it been accessible to the communities that we research for that matter. And also, I also strongly fund us who want to research evidence, before they can give you money. Hello, I'm queer. My life is evidence enough. So why do I have to spend another 3 years trying to prove that there's an issue? By the time you give me money, the problem would have been, worsened. So sometimes listen to our stories. That should be evidence enough. Because we do research. I have publications, but no one knows about them.
Yeah. And we need to do that research.
We need to do the research, but let's not use the research as a limitation for us to get access to resources.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the research needs to be documented. So, for instance, in South Africa, from my knowledge of wanting to learn more within the trans community, there is nothing that I've picked up that hasn't been written from a homophobic or patriarchal point of view.
The epistemic violence.
Yeah.
Who are the knowledge creators?
Precisely.
Yeah.
Fiji.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Virginia. I'm asking this question on the fact that I'm an old croc, and Bongani said something about if the older people were doing it that way, we are doing it this way. So I want to ask a question based on the fact that I see we are all aspiring to feminist leadership, right? But I want to know, where do we strike a balance in terms of taking care of us as well as the work that we need to do? For instance, the moderator said, if you feel like you are tired, you are tired. You can stay in your room, right? But how then do we take cognizance of the efforts, the resources, the time, and actually even the well-being of the people who were involved in this process, right? And also with regard to the opportunity that this process might be also giving to us in order to be able to take forward the work. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, careful, sorry. Would anybody like to respond?
Yeah, I think...
Sorry, are you okay, Virginia? Thank you for that.
I think that Virginia raised a valid point in that the reality right now, because we don't necessarily have a circular ecological relationship of work because it's hierarchical, when one person rests, somebody else does twice the job, right? And it's usually, if a supervisor rests, then the subordinate does twice the job. It's that patriarchal, hierarchical relationship. And I think we have the difficult task of shifting it from this linear way to a more cyclical and ecological way of work, where we decentralize somebody being responsible for doing a lot of work. And especially people who are passionate, who are deeply talented, who have a skill that might be scarce in an organization, especially when it comes to project management and those sort of organizational skills, where it's almost like they can't go on leave, they can't take rest because they're essentially doing the work of 3 or more people. And when they leave an organization, the gap is felt because of that hierarchical relationship. So I think it's a note for organizational reflection within staff and decentralizing certain roles and responsibilities. Obviously, that will come with its own challenges, but it would be able to offset the amount of work that people do in order to take rest. I also have a request, moderator, if we can give more time for the people in the audience and not necessarily us always responding to them.
No problem. We got over there.
Good morning.
Morning.
How are you all? My name is Kat, and I don't mean to be coy. So the question that I have is actually about wellness. And essentially when we know for a fact, and we hear this over and over and over again, and speaking as a trans-identifying person myself, we constantly hear about the expensiveness of accessing trans-inclusive healthcare. And then we are also advocating for LGBTQ people to be part of organizations, to work for these organizations and do all that sort of stuff. However, it would seem there's a general trend where not only do our grassroots organizations, or even the organizations that are a bit better established, not cover medical aid for people, but even when you've employed a trans person, you're expecting the salary they get to still go towards their trans-specific healthcare. And so the question is, if you haven't done so yet, why aren't you doing it? And if you are considering it, or if you are doing it, how is that panning out? Because, again, we as trans folks, we're facing all of the intersections of the struggles.
Yeah.
And yet you can give some folks lube and dental dams and all that sort of stuff, and it's like, okay, great, wonderful, go live your life. Whereas with us, it's like, actually, babe, how much of your salary goes towards your hormones? How much of your salary are you even able to afford a surgery fund?
Yeah.
Right? That's just the question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kat. That is a very, very valid question. Does anybody want to answer? I'm looking at Liberty. I thought you were going to answer, sorry. Are there any organizations here that could possibly answer or possibly give a solution? Yeah. Absolutely. And then also, I mean, bringing up the government, one of the other issues that we have, and I'm talking from the South African context, is that I'm not going to say it's uneducated or they don't know, they do, but choose not to incorporate it into policies. And that leads to the other level of gender-based violence that our trans community are facing by not having the right to access that type of healthcare. And that automatically needs to change. I think
Okay.
I'll go there and then I'll go there, then I'll go back.
All right. Thank you. Just want to make a suggestion. Maybe what would make most of us speak is to get as many questions, then the panel will deal with this at the end. Because otherwise, I think if we start...
so some of us can't remember all at once.
Okay.
That's why we're going.
Yeah. Anyway, firstly, I wanted to thank Virginia for the singing yesterday. I think it helped those of us who were scared, but I just want to put it for the record for those of us from Malawi. Yesterday was a breeze because we've been in West vessels, and at least we're sure we're going to get there and come back. And I just want to thank Other Foundation for taking us safely and bringing us back. I think I know what it means for an institution of this to entrust itself to take people and bring them back. And all of the people who have funded the trip, thank you very much. I had never been there. Coming to today, I'm going to make my comments, and I would like, I do not think it's the place of academics to come here and think we can be teaching. Mm-hmm. But there are times when we do need to step up, if indeed we are in this because we believe in growing a movement. Mm. What I'm seeing and what I'm hearing is a movement struggling with the class question. The question of, are we carrying everybody, or is this becoming an elitist group? Yeah. And I think the balance we need is, we must be very careful not to essentialize the struggle. This is not just a struggle for the poor. This is not just a struggle for people in townships. It is a struggle for everybody. LGBTIQ plus people are found in every class of the society. And we should be very careful not to end up making those who have privilege to be guilty. Otherwise, we can end up failing to reach those who have made it, and they end up being dropped from that class because you attain a class. You're not born there. And the question is, even those who are privileged, they actually have a way to pull those who are not, for them to be many. The trip is not for us to stay where we are, to stay in the townships, to be poor forever. No. So for me as a feminist, one of the things which I've battled with and which I'm happy to say my whole PhD has proved is that patriarchy is global. It is in every class. And if you have not read, go look at Malcolm X's Why We Catch Hell. Just Google Why We Catch Hell. Malcolm X tells you, look, you catch hell because you are black, and it is not because you are visible. It's got nothing to do with that. No, whether you hide under a table or whatever, they will come for you. So the point I'm trying to say is it's about how do we do the linkages of class. If it's about English that is being used, there are also other languages. Yesterday we spoke through song. That united us all, even those who can't even speak Zulu or Xhosa or whatever. Even if you're humming, but we became one. Sometimes it's football, sometimes it's sex, sometimes it's whatever, okay? So the point I'm trying to say is, we speak in different languages. And what makes us a great movement is that we have a space for everybody. Whether you speak English or Afrikaans or whatever, we don't care. You are welcome to the other foundation. As long as you are saying, look, I make it very, very clear. My point is an orgasm has got no nationality. Simple. Simple. All right? So, yeah, I don't think anybody, when you are having sex, you are like, I'm having Malawian sex, so I'm having... It's just an orgasm, period. All right? So, what I want to ask here is, what we should focus on is, how do we build a movement of all classes together? It's not about, oh, you are privileged, so you can't talk. No. They can actually pull you to where they are, because even whilst they are there, they are being othered. All right? One. Number two, so really, honestly, I would like us to get a whole publication that produces what are the dangers of essentializing this movement. If we essentialize it, we shall alienate others, we will alienate other nationalities. We must be a collective. And that means celebrating everybody for whatever you have achieved. The other issue is, let us not give in to blame the victim syndrome. We are not where we are because of our fault. No. We are where we are because patriarchy, capitalism work together to keep us where we are. Now, if we ever think, if we push back, they will leave us. No, they're doing it intentionally. They are profiting from. The question is, how do we extend ours? How do we scale up our efforts? And I will end by saying, there is nothing as painful as a knowledgeless LGBTIQ person. Please, let's read, let's arm ourselves. They cannot put you out there when you've got the papers. It's harder for them to keep you out. It's harder for them to discriminate against you. I'm saying this as a feminist who has even entered parliament with people screaming, oh my God, you cannot believe, she supports LGBTIQ, how can you vote for her? But because of the PhD, they couldn't do anything about it. So I might not look as Barbie doll as they want. I might not be beautiful to them. Well, unfortunately, I actually think I'm okay. I actually think I'm fine. So
you are more than okay.
They could do whatever they want. Oh my God. I always tell them, just look at my butt, look at my legs. I'm damn proud of them. So, no, I'm saying this as a joke, but it has come as a big journey. Because the time I was growing up, people were beautiful, were slim. They were not big like me. I grew up in Zimbabwe and it was not funny. You had to be light. Now I was dark, fat, deep voice. Does it get any worse? But after some time, I told them, if you don't want to look at this, look away. And later I discovered, oh, there are so many who like looking at this. And I'm all right. So guys, my point is just to say, I really am I'm happy that this conversation is coming out. But I think our next publication, research, talk, whatever, let us make sure we cannot have a movement that's not united along race, class, and where we are going. If we end up, asking each other on this, we'll end up with people saying, maybe I'm being privileged when I do this. We are all going in it together, whether you are Mr. President or you are a person who sleeps in the street.
Yeah.
Let's all get onto the LGBTIQ question until everybody is free in this continent. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for your wisdom and for your honesty and for that call to action. Okay.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
I'm Anil Padavartan, and I'm the programs manager at Gender Dynamics here in Cape Town in South Africa. And to declare my privilege, I am a white transgender man. And just to give an indication of how privileged I am, I have medical aid. And the point that I would like to make on this is that we know how expensive medical aid is. It's an indication of privilege. The idea of community-based organizations being able to provide their staff with medical aid is a dream. The idea of large numbers of our community members being able to afford medical aid is a dream. We're not going to get there in our lifetime. We will continue to fight, but private medical care in South Africa is for the elite. It's for the privileged. In the state sector for mental health, there are so few providers that people will be in waiting lists for months to see a psychologist. And we're not gaining mental health professionals in our public sector, we're bleeding it. People who are qualified mental health providers are leaving South Africa.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that other countries across the region are seeing this as well. In the turmoil that has been brought about by COVID, we are losing professionals in Africa who are going to opportunities in the global north. So we are not going to be able to rely on the experts to come in and give us our mental health care. And once again, if we are relying on an expert to come and give us service provision, we are not building from within and within our movements and within our organizations.
Yeah.
So what I think we need to be focusing on and looking at is, instead of waiting for experts with expertise to come in and provide us with these services, how can we build the capacity in our organizations to run projects and programs where we are working on our own mental health, where we are building our skills to have spaces where people can talk and debrief and we hold each other? And how can we then take those skills out in our communities and build the capacity for people to be able to take that responsibility for their own mental health and say we're standing together as a collective and we're providing mental health, whether it's support groups, whether it's spaces, whatever, but things that are community-driven and community-led, it's within us and we have the capacity to do that, because we are never going to be able to afford or access the experts and the qualified professionals if we're wanting to bring this to our communities.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for sharing that. Very, very valid points.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I loved when the panelists said that activism is a work of care. And I think one of our most frustration is because we are working at a framework that is not compatible with our outcome. Because as the panelist says, in neoliberalism, everything is managed as a business. So activism have to manage as a business. How can we measure work on activism because you see, at organizations, we are talking about LGBTQA persons, especially Black people from Africa. And we are talking about mental health, we are talking about housing and all the problems. How we don't have signifiers or measures to work with this. Why? Because we are, the framework of neoliberalism and capitalism want everything to work as a business. You know, at a business, I buy things, I sell, and I have profits. At activism, how can I see profits on mental health? What is the signifier? Say, oh, that person is cured, or that person is saved. So there is this frustrating problem because most of our organizations, because of funding and everything, because of this framework, we have to work through a framework of business. And when we have this framework of business and we want, oh, okay, we established that we have this place that we give people condoms, you know, so we can make our reports. But how do you make reports about mental healthness? How do you make reports about well-being, safety? Because at the ONGs, we have reports. We want, you know, it's very capitalist, very business. We have to, we brought this, we distribute these condoms, you know? So when we want to talk about mental health, we want to talk about medical care, how do we put that? Because mental health is forever. There is no point of, oh, we're gonna make this project for 10 years and then people will be cured. Wow, we won't know. It's a progressive thing, you know? Colonialism worked for millions of years. We cannot make change but distribute things in 10 years and be like, well, the LGBT community, the black community, it's safe. So our frustration, it's because the framework that we are working is not comfortable with the outcome we want. So it's that frustrating because the donors, they want the reports. Where do you spend the money, you know? And you cannot say, oh, we had to pay to a never endless healthcare system. How do you work with that? It's difficult because we want profits, and we cannot profit on people's lives, you know? So I think our frustration is that we are in a framework that is not comfortable to our goal. Our goal is liberation, and in neoliberalism, there is no liberation.
Yeah.
So we have to change that framework.
Thank you very much for that. And as I said in the beginning, that the reinvention is definitely connected to what was happening before, to that resilience before. I'll go this side. So, Mama.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something in response to their comment. I think the biggest issue is through neoliberalism, the push towards social entrepreneurship and social businesses and trying to frame NGOs to be social businesses to make themselves sustainable. The core purpose of businesses is maximization of profits for shareholders' wealth, not for communal wealth. And as I said before, I believe activism is care work in the framework of governance, not in the framework of business and entrepreneurship. And I think we need to maybe do a bit more research or create publications that can help support the framing of CSOs as a governance actor, upholding human rights from a governance perspective. Because, as was noted, you can't, social businesses are in the business of trying to make human rights profitable and turning that into solving problems with solutions, right, from a monetary perspective. But that ends up having monetized resources, right? So like water, for example, being monetized and framing it around social entrepreneurship. So I think we need to start maybe seeking ourselves and those who have the ability to generate knowledge around CSOs as a governance actor and not necessarily around actors on social businesses. So they can be tied into the overall governance framework.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Much appreciated. Yeah.
need to business myself out of the movement because of my age. But I don't think that's going to happen. But also looking at some of the conversations that are happening. When I look at, for instance, the issue of privilege, sometimes I actually feel guilty because when I started in the movement, I had nothing, I was nobody. And the community gave me the privilege to be where I am today. So I acknowledge my privilege from the community and I'll continue to use it. Because I've been able to speak in different spaces and different places where the community that we are representing has not been able to speak. And should I feel guilty about it? It begs the question then, when where I am at now, where I'm able to say I'm educated, I have property, I have insurance, I start to feel guilty because the people that I save do not have the same. I think what it only does is that whatever has come to me is an additive for me to be able to do what I do best, which is represent them and be able to take them along with me. So one of the things that we have done over the years is that the issue of mental health is not something that is a new buzzword because COVID came. I joined the organization of girls as a therapist, and I've been providing therapy to the community, not because COVID was there, but because people needed to come out, people were being displaced from home, people were being brutalized. What we've only seen with COVID is that it has simply highlighted an existing epidemic that is within our community, where people were already struggling with drug abuse, loneliness, depression, and so on. But what we also need to ask ourselves is, when we talk about mental health, what are we talking about? What does that package look like? Because if I take a vacation and I'm on the beach, is that mental health? Maybe for me. But what about the person in the village? Maybe it's just walking in the bush and looking at the cows and counting them. So we also need to understand that when we are in this space, perhaps as activists, our mental health program or our design and thinking of mental health is quite different from the people that we save. So we need to compartmentalize that and say, who are we talking in this space? Are we talking about general mental health for activists, or we are talking about the community? Because the package is not the same. And it's bound not to be. So that's something we need to think about and unpack that at different standards, because I now have a medical aid which sometimes is not consistent because the resources that I receive sometimes do not allow me to continue to pay for my medical aid. But it's not the same that the village trans woman that I met last week in one of the remote places has the same privilege. And where do I get resources to provide her with such a privilege? It's probably not, it's impossible. So it's important that we also think about the programs that we are designing. The many organizations that I see and that are currently existing in my space, a lot of them are formed out of the HIV money. And there's a competition between them trying to count how many people they've tested HIV, how many people they've given a pill, and how many people they've put on PrEP, than actually providing a whole comprehensive intervention. So they don't think about mental health. The donors are thinking about the numbers. But when we look at the whole spectrum of HIV and how it started and so on, women and men from the general population were not being counted about rushing with the numbers. They were thinking about better nutrition, spirituality, mental health. But we have allowed and accepted that we needed to be counted, and only numbers is what matter, and not the health and well-being of our community in the interventions that are being pushed today. So we really need to go and push back and ask that they mainstream mental health as a priority into our communities. The budgets that we should be getting should actually be also a big chunk. Because the mental health issues that we are struggling with have to do with some of the things that have been mentioned here. The violence has not started today. I have experienced violence. I live with that trauma every day. How do we take responsibility to make sure that mental health becomes part of our daily life? We just need to push back and demand that. And also my last comment is that as activists, sometimes we overcompensate in everything that we do. So the issue of us taking time off work because I'm not feeling it, I'm not feeling well, I'm not up to it, and so on, is a reality. Because straight people don't work the same way that we do. I have partners and friends that every day after work, they go to the bar and drink. I'm rushing home to answer an email at 9 o'clock in the evening. They don't have that because they don't over-push themselves to prove to a donor that they need more money. We do.
Yeah.
And that leads us to have burnout. So I think we also need to balance issues around, yes, you are giving me resources, but it doesn't mean I have to work like a horse.
Exactly.
So we need that balance. And we deserve to get that money because the taxpayers have said you also don't have a job, so go and work in Africa with those people. I need to keep you in the job, you need to keep me in the job, because for me, my job is not going to end because I happen not to get money. One of the things that I always tell people is that the work I do and the life that I live did not come because of a donor. The issue came first before donors.
Yeah.
I was born in a country where they do not accept my sexual orientation. I was born in a space where people kill, violate people who they don't understand like me. Only donors got excited because they saw something that we were doing and they said, can we help? But currently, what we see is that we put money forward than the issue. And in that way, we are driven to agendas of the donors and not what our community needs.
Yeah.
So a lot of the current mental health issues that we are dealing with have to do with higher unemployment. We don't talk about it. So when someone is chased away from home, even if they are gay and they are working, they can go and rent their own home, but they can't do that now because we have made them more dependent on the money that we are getting from donors. So I think it's also about us looking at the broader issues of economic development, livelihoods. The same way we have done with HIV, I believe it's possible. If you were uncomfortable when you started within the HIV space, go into the economic space and also be uncomfortable until you get where we are today. So mental health is not a new issue, but what we need to do is how do we integrate it within our programs, but also revisiting the issue of language.
Yeah.
If I
And
go
also
to a
using the
community and
privilege, as you
one
said
last
before.
comment, if I go to a community and I say I'm trans, will they understand that? I'm intersex, I'm gay. So it's also about languaging. It's something that we need to come up with.
Thank you very much for that. And of course, you touched on something which we brought up right in the beginning with all of us, is that how do we use our privilege when we go into spaces? And it's not about speaking on behalf of the other or what we're not. It's about creating that space so that when we do leave, there are a lot more chairs at the table to be filled. I think we had two more this side.
Hello, everyone. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Jürgen from Mauritius. I will be translating for my colleague and friend Andrea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bonjour à tous, je suis Andrea de Maurice. Actuellement, je suis secrétaire de l'association Visagé qui milite pour les personnes transgenres à Maurice, mais aussi je suis la première femme transgenre à être vice-présidente de l'association de la Young Queer Alliance.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andrea. I'm currently the vice president of the Young Queer Alliance and also the secretary of the association Visagé. And the Young Queer Alliance.
Ce que je voulais faire ressortir, c'est qu'il y a pas mal d'associations à Maurice, mais il y a certains parmi qui mettent plus l'emphase sur les personnes gays au lieu de toute la communauté.
There is a lot of organization in Mauritius, but however, they focus mostly on gay people rather than transgender people.
Mais spécialement les personnes qui ont beaucoup d'argent.
Particularly people who have a lot of money.
Okay. Donc, à Maurice aussi, si on est une femme transgenre,
in Mauritius, if we are a transgender woman,
et qu'on fait l'application pour pouvoir obtenir un job,
if we make an application to obtain a job,
donc même si on est éduqué, mais malheureusement, vu que notre apparence et notre gender manque,
even though we are educated, our appearance and gender,
donc on peut voir que notre employeur va nous refuser le boulot, vu que nous sommes des personnes transgenres.
Our employer will refuse us the job.
Fort heureusement que moi, je suis la première femme transgenre qui travaille dans une des institutions financières à Maurice.
Fortunately, I'm the first transgender woman in Mauritius to work for the most prestigious bank of Mauritius.
Et aussi, ce que je veux faire ressortir, c'est qu'à Maurice, on a beaucoup de femmes transgenres qui sont HIV positives.
I would like to highlight that in Mauritius, we have a lot of transgender women who are HIV positive.
Mais malheureusement, vu qu'il y a certains qui, comme on dit, que dira-t-on, mais la plupart des personnes qui sont infectées, surtout les femmes transgenres,
Usually, it's about what people will be saying, and we have transgender women who are positive.
donc on préfère éviter que dira-t-on et on nous laisse mourir directement. Ok, ok. Et donc, vu que, par exemple, par exemple, il y a un de mes amis qui a été infecté.
For example, there is one of my friends who has been infected.
Et donc, elle a préféré de ne pas suivre le traitement du VIH/SIDA et se laisser mourir.
She has preferred not to follow the HIV treatment and let her die.
Pourquoi? Parce qu'il y a beaucoup de personnes qui font beaucoup de palabres, comme on dit.
Because in Mauritius, we have people who like to gossip.
Et donc, c'est par rapport à ça. Et donc, des fois, au lieu d'aider les gens, on les laisse comme si
So like she has been mentioning, so her friend was unable to go ahead with the treatment because she was afraid of gossip. It's good that you know that we are an island, and Ireland is very small. Everyone knows everyone, and at any time, people will be gossiping about you because we are only 1.3 million inhabitants. And with social media, we become like smaller.
Et dernièrement, je voulais faire ressortir aussi, il y a une de mes amies qui s'appelle Kelly Wayne, qui est très connue à Maurice.
I would like to highlight that I have one of my friends, whose name is Kelly Wayne, who is well known in Mauritius. She's actually a well-known artist.
Et donc, je peux faire ressortir qu'actuellement, elle a dû prendre l'asile en France.
I would like to add that she had to seek for asylum in France.
Pourquoi? Parce que son passeport a été expiré, elle a fait la démarche au niveau de l'ambassade, mais malheureusement, ça a été refusé par l'État mauricien, parce que vu qu'elle a fait la chirurgie esthétique et aussi le changement de sexe.
So she has taken asylum in France because her passport has expired and she was unable to return to Mauritius to complete the procedures because she has already undergone her surgery.
Pour en finir,
to conclude,
I think that we need to take space and be visible in the society and in our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing in their own space because of safety and security issues, but do it in a way that is not going to be affecting somebody else's mental well-being. More importantly is that if we do speak from privilege, acknowledge that privilege. But then what are you going to do with it when you do acknowledge it and when you do work into spaces? And then, and finally, is that putting ourselves first. I think somebody mentioned in one of the other panels, when you get on a plane and they tell you if the plane is going to crash and the thing comes down, I can't remember the name of it, you gotta give yourself oxygen first and then help the next person. Even if you're a parent, you do it first. And there's nothing wrong. I mean, I started this discussion quoting Audre Lorde because there's nothing wrong with looking after ourselves. Yes, the way we look after ourselves is not the same way that somebody from Sandton, Johannesburg might look after themselves, or somebody from a rural village in Malawi. But we've got to find different coping mechanisms and looking after each other and being honest when we're not okay. Thank you so much. This conversation will, of course, continue in the corridors, online. I will also be documenting as much as possible through my blog, and then, of course, through the work that we do with the other foundation. Thank you so much for taking time out. I know we're tired. You made it for the 9 o'clock session. Thank you for also waiting for us because I know we were running a little bit late. But I wish you a beautiful day. Look after you. If you're feeling heavy, go outside, take off your shoes, do a bit of grounding on the grass, feel that vitamin D from the sun, laugh, cry, do what you need to do, but you do you, boo. because you deserve it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rosie. And we have a little gift for all the panelists, not just because it's my favorite panel. Paul said I shouldn't say that. Literature. That is the first anthology, the first Gerald Clark anthology that we published. The new one, what happened to my notes? The new one is called, that will be published of all the finalists from last night, is The Beautiful Ones Have Just Been Born. And there they are. So, thank you, panelists. Are you hungry? You did get it. Yes, you can be dismissed, thank you. We planned for a certain number of people for the whole of Kopano. There are more people than we expected. We will share the food that there is. And we hope that it's enough. We will try and get more food. But we don't want to be excessive and we don't want to waste. So if you haven't had enough to eat and you feel hungry, please do raise it with me and we'll try and make sure that there's enough for everyone. Without being excessive, we really don't want to be wasteful. Trevor, who was on the panel, I'm very proud because he was a volunteer at our, was it the second or the first Kopano, Trevor? And then went on to train in how to mobilize and organize, which the other foundation supported. And I'm very proud of the organization that he's established in Zimbabwe and come back again to speak on this panel. It gives us great pride, Trevor, to see you doing so well and doing such good work. There are a number of people who are not feeling well. And so I want to remind everyone that COVID is a very serious reality. And I want to ask everyone to be particularly careful. Please, if you're touching the microphone, we're going to put these sanitizer things there. Please sanitize before you touch it and afterwards. In the common areas, please be particularly careful. We're concerned. Kopano's theme is about rollbacks, resilience, reinvention. You should see up somewhere the description of what Kopano is, a strategy space for LGBTI struggles in Southern Africa. The point is that we take this space to reflect on the strategies that we use, to review, to think ahead, to be critical. As you know, the Triangle Project and Free Gender have raised very serious issues about the city of Cape Town and Kopano being here at the university, and how we position ourselves in that space as Kopano, and about the other foundation itself. The Triangle Project and Free Gender have issued a statement that is public. We believe that that should be shared openly with all participants at Kopano. And so, as you leave the room today, there are copies of the statement. We still don't have Wi-Fi. There are copies of the, we do? Nobody told me. Okay, we do have Wi-Fi. We've already cut the tree and printed the paper. So there's copies on that side at the back and on that side at the back. Please do take that statement and read it, reflect on it. It informs our strategic reflection. It's valuable, and we should consider that in our discussions. Free Gender and the Triangle Project have been present at Kopano. Elspeth Engelbrecht and Funeka Saldat are both friends and colleagues, comrades. We've spoken, and I want to assure you that if you think that there's any personal or organizational conflict involved, that is not what it's about. It's about the issues that I've mentioned in that statement. So please do reflect on it and take it as part of the consideration of very serious issues that we need to be discussing today and tomorrow as we talk about reinvention. Right? So on the flow of the program, we're now at the top. Right? Let's take a break. Well, no, not yet. We're going to take a break, but Kutlwano has some announcements to make.
Sorry. I like all the panelists, and all the panelists will be getting the books. Sorry they were delayed getting to Cape Town, the logistics of moving from one part of the country to another. So I'll make sure that all the other panelists also get a book. For SEMG's benefit, we found your bag. Please locate Dear Tandega from our team. They have your bag for you. We're still looking for the black scarf, so if there are any leads on the black scarf, that would be greatly appreciated. Also, I wanted to follow up if anybody has some of the flags from the march yesterday. I know everybody wants the flags, but we don't have enough for everyone. So we're using them collectively. So if you still have some of the flags from yesterday, we'd appreciate it. We've got it back so that at the next Kopano, we're able to fly all our flags. Please find me or a volunteer or a team member from the other foundation if you have any of the flags. Now, we're a little behind in our program, and that's fine. We started early, but more importantly, the discussions that we're having this morning were critically important, and we didn't want to disturb that. So we're just going to have to adapt because we're reinventing. So reinvention is also about adaptation strategies, it's about pivoting and changing path when things don't go according to plan. So what we're going to do after this session is we're going to have 6 breakaway groups. The breakaway groups are on the screen. They are by LGBTI subsectors. We know that how we've done it is simplistic because our identities are complex and we are sometimes all of these things or some of these things jointly and we can't separate them. But we know that it's also critically important to create space for some groups, especially the groups that remain a lot less visible and are a lot less organized. So with that understanding, please note that 1, you are free to move around the groups if you want. And then 2, if you feel like none of the groups represent who you are or they're not adequate enough to capture the complexity of your own experiences, please feel free to form your own space, right? Let's reinvent in those ways. For every group, we kindly request that one person be identified to give the video reflections. We would like to get the reflections done today. The crew who does the editing for us so that the videos are ready often have to work well into the morning, 3 a.m., 4 a.m., to get those videos to us. We've been talking about well-being a lot, and that impacts our well-being too. So if we can get the videos done during the day, it makes it easier for them to get it done and also be able to rest. So please don't forget that. There will be co-facilitators in every group, and the co-facilitators will be able. It's 12:20. We're supposed to have lunch at 1. With your permission, I'd like to propose that this session was supposed to be 2 hours, but I'm proposing that we cut it to 1 hour, and then that we end at 1:30. This means I'm proposing that we take a working tea, grab your tea, identify your group, and then start the work there. This might push our program up by 30 minutes or so, but I think I'm fairly confident that we can recover because we are in that reinvention mode. So are we good? Good. Enjoy your tea. I think by now we all know where the rooms are, but if we don't, the volunteers are around to show us. Thank you very much.